Hey guys, Christian, and happy Back to Hogwarts Day. And as a way to celebrate, I thought it'd be a really fun idea to talk about the new HBO Harry Potter series, and talk about all the news and updates we've gotten for it so far, and share my thoughts on them, just so that you can stay up to date with everything that's going on in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So without further ado, let's jump in. So the show is supposed to expand over the course of a decade and have one season per book, which I think is actually a really good idea, just because I love the movie so much, but obviously as the writers were adapting the book, they had to take a bunch of stuff out. So it's going to be nice that they're trying to keep as much from the books in the episodes themselves, just because after reading the books, there's just so much that's left untold, especially when it came to the movies, so it's going to be nice to actually see it finally on the screen. And it's supposed to be a co-production between HBO, Warner Brothers Television, Bronte Film and TV, and Heyday Films. I know that Heyday Films was responsible for the movies, so it's really cool that we're going to get David Heyman from the movies on this series as well, because David Heyman worked on the original movies, and he was there from the beginning of those productions all the way through the end. So it's really cool to have someone from the original films work on this new series and kind of help with that transition. And the showrunner will be Francesca Gardner, and the director will be Mark Mylon, and they'll serve as executive producers alongside J.K. Rowling, Neil Blair, Ruth Kenley Netz, and David Heyman. And then back in May of 2022, reports circulated about a meeting between Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav and J.K. Rowling, and they were talking about future projects within the Wizarding World on HBO. And then back in December of 2022, it was reported that Warner Brothers Television CEO Channing Dungey shared plans on expanding the Wizarding World franchise. And then back in April of 2023, at a Warner Brothers investment meeting, it was announced that the series was in development, and David Zaslav revealed plans for the series for a presentation for HBO Max. And then the search for a showrunner was underway, while David Heyman was in talks to produce for the series. And then after J.K. Rowling was confirmed to be an executive producer for the series, this caused backlash due to the controversy she's been attracting. But then HBO and HBO Max chairman Casey Bloys said that she would not be dismissed. And then back in June 2024, Francesca Gardner was hired as showrunner and writer, and Mark Mylon was hired to direct several episodes of the series. And both them and David Heyman were announced as executive producers for the series. And also back in June 2024, as a strategy shift for content, the series was moved from Max streaming to HBO Network, but they did say that it'll also be streaming on HBO Max, so that's good news. But I'm sure it's a way for Warner Brothers to get more eyes on HBO, just to help that network out a little bit more, which totally makes sense. And then several writers were confirmed for the series, including Andy Greenwald, Bijan Shabani, Josephine Garner, Laura Neal, Martha Hillier, Ripley Parker, Sam Hallcroft, and Ted Cohen alongside Francesca Gardner. And then back in November of 2024, Casey Bloys said that season 1 and 2 will be filmed back to back due to the natural aging of the kids, which explains why some actors were cast whose characters don't appear until book 2, Chamber of Secrets. And then speaking of casting, back in September of 2024, led by casting directors Lucy Bevan and Emily Brockman, a casting call was released looking for characters to play Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger, searching for kids between the ages of 9 and 11 who are residents of the UK and Ireland. And then as of April of 2025, describing to agents to submit qualified performers, and 32,000 actors actually auditioned for the roles. And then from November to December of 2024, various actors were considered for the roles in the series, and a decision for the casting of Harry, Ron, and Hermione was expected to release relatively soon. And then back in February of this year, John Lithgow entered final negotiations to portray Albus Dumbledore, and he announced his casting soon after. And I think this can be pretty good. I think the main issue that people had is that he's an American actor playing a British character, and this marks the first time the Harry Potter series that a non-British or Irish actor is portraying a main character. But then John Lithgow assured fans that he'd be using a British accent, and that he'll be working closely with a dialect coach, which I'm totally cool with. I know he's played British characters in the past, and that he can pretty much nail a British accent, so it personally doesn't bother me that he's an American actor playing a British character. Just as long as he stays true to the character, then I'm all for it. I think another controversy is that he's in his late 70s, and this series is supposed to unfold over the course of a decade, so we'll see if he still has the same stamina and energy to keep portraying the character, just because Dumbledore's character gets more and more physical as the books go on. But I'm sure he'll be able to do it, so I'm actually really excited for it. And then back in March of this year, Papa Sidiou was nearing a deal to portray Severus Snape, while Janet McTeer and Nick Frost entered final negotiations to portray Minerva McGonagall and Rubeus Hagrid. And let's just address the elephant in the room of the fact that Papa, who's a black actor, will be playing Severus Snape, who's described as a white character in the books. And I totally see both arguments. The only arguments that I don't agree with are the racists out there who are just angry at the fact that they cast a black character play a white character just because of his skin color. So I totally disregard those arguments, but I totally understand the arguments of the people who don't like this casting because he's the character that Harry hates most. He's accused of stealing the Philosopher's Stone throughout most of the first book, and in later books it's revealed that he's been bullied by James and the rest of the Marauders, and that he comes from a poor family. So it's gonna be really awkward seeing a black man portrayed in that way, which I totally understand, but I think I'm more of the mentality of just kind of like a wait and see kind of attitude. You know, just because we haven't seen the series yet, and we don't really know how they're gonna write the character Snape within this series. Is it gonna be completely book accurate, or are they gonna make some tweaks here and there, just so that this casting isn't as shocking? So I guess we'll see. And I'm not really too familiar with his work, but I've seen clips of him online, and I think he's a fantastic actor, and I think he can definitely bring a lot to the role, but it really just depends on how the writers portray this character, and we'll see if they make him more sympathetic early on, or if they're gonna be really faithful to the books and just make him a completely hateful character. But I guess we'll see once we get the first production photos of him and the first trailers, and eventually when the series comes out. So like I said, I'm in the camp of a wait and see attitude, but I can definitely see the arguments, and hopefully we can just judge it once the series actually comes out. But then moving on to Janet McTeer as Professor McGonagall, I'm not so familiar with her work, but I've seen her in the latest Mission Impossible movie, and I think she could be really good at portraying the character. And then as far as Nick Frost, I think it's perfect casting. We'll get to it a little bit later, but we got a couple production photos of Nick Frost in costume, and actually looks really accurate. It's kind of a mixture of the Hagrid we've seen in the movies, and then kind of more of the Hagrid that's been described in the books, but also kind of making it its own thing. casting. So I think that could be really good, especially all the movies that he's been in where he's kind of plays that kind of lovable oaf kind of character. So I think he could really bring a lot to the character of Hagrid. And then back in April this year, Luke Thallon and Paul Whitehouse joined the cast in recurring roles as Quirrell and Filch. And again, I'm not really super familiar with their work, but I think they look the parts and I think they could really good in the roles. And then back in May of this year, Dominic McLaughlin, Alistair Stout, and Arabella Stanton were cast as Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And I'm actually really excited about this casting. I think Dominic McLaughlin looks exactly like Harry Potter. And we'll get to this a little bit later, but we also got that first production photo of him as Harry Potter playing the slate board and marking the first day of production. And I think it looks perfect. And he's got the messy hair and the glasses, and obviously his eyes aren't green like they're described in the book. But I don't think that's a negative. I mean, Daniel Radcliffe didn't have green eyes when he portrayed Harry, but just like J.K. Rowling says, as long as his eyes look like his mother's eyes, then that's all that really matters. So we'll see what happens with the casting of Harry's mother, but I'm sure they won't announce that until way later. And then Alistair Stout looks exactly like Ron. Obviously he has red hair. He's described in the books of having like a long nose and being like tall and lanky and everything like that, but I'm not really too worried about the description. Just as long as he stays true to the character, then that's all that really matters. And then Arabella Stanton as Hermione Granger. I think she looks great. Obviously she doesn't have the bushy brown hair and she has more tan skin and dark hair, but I've seen a couple clips of her online playing the character of Matilda in the stage version, and I think she's a really great performer. And I think she can really capture the character of Hermione. She's also portraying Hermione in the audiobook version, and just based on the clips that we've gotten from the advertisement, she really sounds like Hermione and a little bit like a young Emma Watson. So I think she could be great. And again, I don't really care too much about the actors not looking 100% how the characters are described in the book, but as long as they stay true to the character, then that's all that really matters. And then back in August of this year, Dominic gave his first public comments of the casting. He told the BBC that the character was a dream role for him and that he was a fan of the books. So that's really good news. So I can tell he's really going to take this part seriously and do his best to bring this character to life. And the fact that he's going to grow with the role as the series goes on, and the fact that they're going to put more materials from the books in this series, I'm sure it's definitely going to help with the writing and with the direction and with his acting. So I'm really excited to see him portray this role. Also back in May of this year, sets for the series were reportedly already being built. And then back in June of this year, additional casting was announced, including Catherine Parkinson as Molly Weasley, Laux Pratt as Draco Malfoy, Johnny Flynn as Lucius Malfoy, Leo Early as Seamus Finnegan, Alessia Leone as Parvati Patel, Sienna Musa as Lavender Brown, Belle Powley as Aunt Petunia, Daniel Rigby as Uncle Vernon, and Bertie Carvel as Cornelius Fudge. And again, I think all these actors look really good. Obviously with the child actors, I don't know too much about their work, but I think they definitely look the part. I'm sure they're going to do well portraying these roles. And as for Belle Powley and Daniel Rigby, at first I was a little concerned because they don't really look like the characters that are described in the books, but then we got those production photos of them filming at the London Zoo, and they have their wigs and their costumes, and I definitely think they look more like how they're described in the books, so it definitely gets me more excited. And the fact that it looks like the series is actually going to take place in the 90s, just like how they were in the books, gets me really excited, and definitely differentiates the look that we got in the movies. And then back in July of this year, Rory Wilmot and Amos Kitson were cast in the role of Neville Longbottom and Dudley Dursley, while Louise Brealey joined as Madame Hooch, and Anton Lesser was casted as Garrick Ollivander. And I think this is actually really good casting too. I know Louise Brealey best from the Sherlock series, and I thought she was great in that, so it's going to be really nice to see her in this series, portraying a completely different kind of character. And the same with Anton Lesser. I'm mostly familiar with him from seeing him in the Andor series, and seeing him as an imposing Imperial officer, so it's going to be really interesting seeing him as a more subdued character when it comes to the character of Ollivander. And then back in August of this year, Gracie Cochran, Tristan and Gabriel Harlan, and Rory Spooner were revealed to be casted as Ginny, Fred, George, and Percy Weasley. I'm actually really excited about this. It was really cool seeing that photo that they posted with Alistair taking a selfie with the rest of the Weasley siblings surrounding him, and they really look like the characters described in the books. And I'm not super familiar with their work, but I know they've been in a couple other series and they have really good acting chops, so I'm hoping that comes through with these characters just because they're such huge parts within the books. And I'm sure the series will do a really good job expanding on their roles, especially when it comes to Ginny and Percy, just because with the character of Ginny they didn't really give Bonnie Wright too much to do, and she's definitely a lot more dynamic in the books, so hopefully the writers will be able to inject more of that personality into this version of the series and give Gracie a lot more to do. And the same goes with Percy. He's very prominent in the movies for the first couple ones, but then he kind of drifts off as the series goes on. We don't really get to see too much of him because in the books he has a lot bigger role, especially when it comes to his allegiance with the Ministry of Magic, and that kind of creates a sense of antagonism between him and the rest of the Weasley family. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that's portrayed in the series, and hopefully we'll get more announcements of who will be playing Arthur and Bill and Charlie. And in that post they were definitely hinting at the casting of Charlie, so we'll see when that's finally announced, since we haven't seen that character at all in the movies, so this will be the first time we actually get to see him in live action, so I'm actually really excited about that. And then on July 14th this year, principal photography began at Warner Brothers Studios Leavesden, where the original 8 films were shot, and around the same time, leaked photos revealed the construction of the Great Hall set, which isn't really a big surprise just because the Great Hall is such a huge part of the story, so it totally makes sense that they're starting to build that again. Also, a temporary school for the child actors was built at the studio, designed to use up to 600 pupils, and will operate on weekdays between 5 a.m. and 8:30 p.m., ensuring that the cast will have a balance of academic studies with filming over the next 8 to 10 years, which I think is really good so that the kids can have a chance to continue their education while they're not on set filming the series. And then during that same month, the crew spent over a week at the Isle des Seines, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, in Brittany, filming around the Tavetic Lighthouse, leading fans to speculate that they could be filming the hut and the rock scene, the place where Harry and the Dursleys escape to, so that the owls don't find them to deliver Harry's letters from Hogwarts, and the scene where Hagrid finds Harry and tells him that he's a wizard. So we'll see if that gets confirmed as the production goes on, but I think that would definitely be really exciting. And then back in August of this year, filming took place at Borough High Street in Southwark, London, with Dominic McLaughlin and Nick Frost's body double present. And again, I think it looks really cool. Definitely reminds me of when Daniel Radcliffe and Robbie Coltrane's body double were filming. And back then the body double had a really unconvincing Robbie Coltrane head. But it looks like with this one, the animatronics are definitely a lot more advanced. And it looks like they have tracking marks on them just so that it can be enhanced with CGI to make it look more convincing. And it's really cool seeing Dominic in the 90s garb, like the jacket and the oversized pants. And yeah, he definitely looks like Harry. And we'll see what they do with the whole scaling issue. But it sounds like Hagrid in this series is actually just going to be 7'2". So he's not going to be too much of a giant per se. We'll see what they do in the series. Maybe they just said that to throw people off. And he'll actually be a lot bigger in the series and slightly closer to how he's described in the books. But again, we'll see when the series comes out. Hopefully as we get closer, we'll get a brand new trailer and we'll get a little bit more context how his size is portrayed. Also in August of this year, filming took place at King's Cross Station and we got our first look at the Weasley family in costume. It actually looks really good. I really like all the attention to detail that they put into the costumes, especially with the character of Ron and how you can see the logo for the Chelsea Cannons on his shirt, because in the books that's his favorite Quidditch team. So I'm glad the filmmakers paid attention to that detail. And as far as Ginny and Mrs. Weasley, they definitely kind of like that quirky kind of mismatched color scheme that's pretty much perfectly described from the books. I think it's also interesting the look that they gave to Fred and George and the fact that their costumes look a little bit preppy as opposed to the movies where they're just kind of wearing sweaters that look kind of plain. But I think these new costumes really bring out their personality and that kind of quirky rebellious spirit that they have. So I actually kind of like the change. And it'll be interesting to finally see these scenes within context once we get the first trailers and eventually when the episode comes out. But overall I really like these costumes and I definitely appreciate the costume designer for putting all this attention to detail into it. And it's really nice the fact that this is a television series and we can see these characters in costume even longer. So yeah, it definitely gets me more excited for sure. And finally, it was confirmed that the series is supposed to be released sometime in early 2027 and the first season will be consisting of 8 episodes. So we still have to wait a little bit. Obviously it's still very early on. They're still filming and it looks like they're going to be filming for a while since they're going to be filming seasons 1 and 2 back to back. But I'm glad that we're getting all these set photos and leaked video and more casting announcements. And it looks like the filmmakers are putting a lot of love and care into the series. So I'm hoping that hard work translates onto the screen and then we get an amazing 8-season adaptation of the Harry Potter series. So I'm definitely looking forward to it for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. What are you most excited for about this series? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe for more videos and I'll see you next time. Mischief managed.